Here we have our table. So there's a cake table, a cookie table, and a pie table. Then we want to display, if title equals cookie title, then set the display to whatever the style is. So in this case, style would be table, or as I said, you also could say equals the null string. So how does it look in the DITA? So in the DITA, we had the user had to do two things, so the authors had to do two things. And one is they had to add the ID into our reference. And this was, again, just to make sure that things were efficient, that the onload element was only added when it was necessary. So we had the writers add the ID attribute at the topic level, a known ID attribute. And so that way we could recognize this and handle it. And then down in the block, or in this case we're dealing with tables, we could say table, and then the important thing, product equals cake table. And so let's just take a look at that in the actual source. So what the writers coded up, they created a reference topic, and in this case they added an ID that we recognized. And so that way, when we recognize that ID, we can add in the onload. And then if you notice, we come to the table, and here's our product. And so this is a table that is specific to cakes. And then down below, we have another table, and this table is specific to cookies. And then we have another table that is specific to pies. So how do we do this in the XSL? Well, there's two parts to this, of course. As I said, there's two parts to the coding. And the first part was when we build the HTML, if we have a known ID, add the onload attribute. And so here we have when the ID is desserts, so here this is an ID we recognize, add the onload attribute, and the value of that onload attribute is going to be JavaScript showDev, and then pass in the name of the table that we want to display, or in this case, set the string so that when the JavaScript gets executed, we actually find this table via the JSON that we've done. The second part, we need to set some attributes. In the portion of output, when we're setting our common attributes for blocks, and in this case the attributes for tables, we want to say, let's match on the product attribute, because as we showed in our source, we have a product attribute, and this indicates pie table, so we're handling that attribute. When we get that attribute, when we get a product attribute, what we want to say is we want to create a new attribute called title and pass in whatever was the product attribute. And so in this case, we have pie table is the product attribute, and in our output, the title attribute is now going to contain pie table. Now, the other thing we have to do, as I said, all these files open up with everything hidden. So we also have to say, we have to create a style attribute and say display none. So this starts things out, so we have we have a file that doesn't display anything, and it's the onload attribute, or the onload function, then that takes care of actually displaying it. And let's just quickly take a look at this on output. So here's our file. So this is the JavaScript file we created. We notice we have our body, and now we have onload, JavaScript, showDev, and we're passing in top look strings table, so we're going to pull out whatever table the JSON says to use in this case. And then, this is of course a little bit hard to read because it's machine generated, but you can see here we begin a table, and we have some starting information, and here we have our title. And so this title is going to be keyed on for displaying or for hiding or showing that table. And here's our style attribute where we say style display equals none. So again, we start out with everything hidden, and then the onload goes through and finds the right table that has this title, cake table, and then sets the display attribute to show. So let's see this in action. Here we have an entry in our table of contents called desserts. And you notice that we're looking at pies because dev equals pies, and so the table that we're displaying, actually what we're seeing here, if you were to do a view source, you'd see what we just saw. You'd actually see there's all the tables here. But since we're hiding them and only revealing one, then you're just seeing this one table of pies. So if we now come along and we change this to cookies, of course we have to reload the page. We're now looking at our cookies. Everything's dynamically loading. And here's our desserts. And we notice we come here, and instead the table that gets displayed is our cookies table rather than the pies table that we were just seeing just a few minutes ago. So, images, inline images in DITA. Now, as I said, the project didn't call for any dynamic images, but if it did, here's probably how I would go about it. You can consider this and think about it. If you have questions after this and want to query me more about some of these things, you can send me email because I'd love to answer questions. We'll see if there's some time. We're nearing noon. If there's any time to answer questions. But if you've got questions about this, please send me email. Anyway, this project didn't call for dynamic images, so what we would do is we would probably insert an image element. This says images DITA, but yes, in the DITA, what we do is use the image element, and we'd use a placeholder image in the href. But we'd also use the other prompts attribute, and that would indicate which image we actually wanted to use. And of course, there would be some association between the value that you passed in on the other prompts attribute and the table in our JSON file. So in the XSL, you would have to add some more special handling for topic image, similar to what we did for topic phrase. And again, you'd say, if there is another prompts attribute, add the title attribute to your output HTML using other props. So now we've got a HTML file that contains a title, so this tells us what we want to do. And then what we would do is have an onload handler. And the reason why we'd want to do this from the onload handler rather than doing it just in line the way we did with the cover images is, if you think about it, you might actually have several occurrences of the same image. Say you're showing a key or an icon or something, you may have several occurrences of that. So it's probably, rather than fix them one up, it's better to use the onload handler to just go through the entire file, look for HTML image tags that have the title that you specified here in the other prompts. When it has that title attribute, then go to your JSON, look up the correct image that you need to use, and use image.source to locate that new image.